We graphite artists work with three basic marks. A dot, let that dot travel and it becomes a line. Add more lines and it becomes descriptive shading. Solid shading where those lines are adjacent. Hatched shading if they're separated by space. And cross-hatching if they're overlaid. I'll add a fourth mark, scribble. This is really just a wandering line that describes the feeling of a surface rather than its true physical appearance. I'm very much in favour of scribble. It can travel in any direction without pause and describe a wide variety of textures. So, with that in mind, let me dispel one myth right away. There isn't any sort of rock drawing technique. You look at the references, analyse what you see, and select the most appropriate of the four marks to use as the base of your drawing. I'd choose a mix of line for the sedimentary rock because it splits into layers, and dot where I might want to suggest a sandy texture. Then, for the more solid river-rounded rocks, I'd use smooth shading, because that shading contrasts well with line and dot, and they emphasise each other's differences. Here, the stones are limestone, often hewn directly from the rock beneath the grass. The rocks are carefully selected, skillfully positioned, and assembled into drystone walls. Drive 20 miles up into the beautiful Yorkshire Dales. There's a vast array of fields of all shapes and sizes. I could tour the Dales with my camera, but fortunately the internet has a wide selection of images to choose from. But I'm going to choose typical Yorkshire. It has stones of a wide variety of shape and size. And I'll choose this part to draw because its variety interests me more than the rest. Yes, it has been enlarged, and some edges are pixelated. But I'm not copying the pixels, just interpreting what I see. For example, there are bits of dried grass and cobwebs that I might ignore, but I can make those decisions while I'm drawing. Now we just have to transfer this to paper. For speed, I projected this linear image. So these are the guidelines I'm going to use as my subject. And note that my reference is not black and white. Use colour, because that encourages you to use the values your drawing needs. Well, we need a starting point, somewhere we can easily understand. And the featureless black gaps have got to score top marks in that respect. And not only that, but as soon as the first gap is established, we know the entire value range available to us, from this black to the white of the paper. So I'm going to be very careful to make this shading as solid as I can, because the visual clue to a deep dark hole is it contains nothing. I've been using 2B for my blacks, but now I'm burnishing that with HB to remove any gaps and holes in the tooth. Did you pick up any telling features earlier from our reference? For example, when the rock is split, it breaks with sharp edges. The surface looks angular and hard, but not particularly smooth. Imagine running your fingertips over it, so you can draw what you feel. And apart from texture, did it feel dry or wet? Damp stones grow moss and lichen. Have a good look at it, because you can use it artistically to soften an edge or add variety to a surface. They all increase the sense of realism. And I mean sense of realism. We're not aiming at physical realism, but drawing that sends the right messages. The visual clues that the brain understands, because that presents us with the greatest creative flexibility. I'm going to use scribble a lot, I think, in these rocks. It just helps me to describe the surface as I see it. Oh, there's a little light patch there. That would make a nice little feature. I'm using a chisel point. The edge is worn off. I can feel the flat face just skating over the surface. Usually I'd use 2H to take the white out, but in this case I'll use this HB. Alright, now I'll go back to the new edge. Whenever you use a flat face of a chisel point, you create a new hard edge. You don't have to stop to sharpen a pencil. Just keep drawing. I quite like some of those dark marks, so I'm going to go back to a 2B for that. It gives a lovely black mark, but at the same time a relatively sharp edge. Let that one fade back. I'll put a bit of a dimple in here, I think. This is not photorealism. Far from it. So don't watch videos like this and think, ah, that's how you draw rock. No, it isn't. This is how I'm drawing rock in this situation today. And, as I suspected I would, I'm using scribble to explore the surface. I'm not copying the rock. I'm incorporating the three-dimensional form I see in a reference with my description of the surface, the way I think it would feel under my fingertips, like Braille. This stone is interesting. It has facets facing the light and one disappearing back into the darkness, which will provide depth to the drawing. I decided to begin with the light face, because the values needed for the other faces will automatically fall into place between the light face and the surrounding blacks. The darker marks are 2B, and most of the scribble is HB. Then a layer of 2H removes all white, because these rocks don't naturally contain white. This is rather similar to blending, but it doesn't soften edges. It smooths the drawing to some extent. It just dulls any white content, which shouldn't be there. I'm doing this rock, but I'm not necessarily copying it. I'm just taking what I like, discarding what doesn't work. Keep the shading random, which will create some nice little features if the eye goes looking for them. There's a nice hard edge there. We'll keep that one. Take this back up towards the light. I like the way the light's catching that, so I will let that continue. Just put a bit of interest into this area. Let's let it just drop away behind there. In which case this edge might catch a bit of highlight. We'll keep it very smooth up here with the odd little mark. We'll let the light catch that edge there. We'll turn that bit down. That's disappearing back into the shade. I think we're going to curve this off, or let it curve underneath. So it's going to lose the light. I'm not interested in what happens here. This is my rock, my world. I'm going to whip through this bit. I'm just going to let it do whatever it wants to do, and then we'll make something of it. That needs to be pushed back into the shade. Actually, I think that looks alright. You see, much of that had to do with light. Study the lighting direction. Work out where the light is shining from. And here, the shadow cast by this stone falls here and here, and suggests the sun is to the left of being directly overhead. Look at these two little holes here. You can see they've got a little highlight around them. That only happens if the light is shining in this direction and catching that edge. So we'll use that as a marker that tells the brain instantly which way the light is shining. Now keep that in mind as you draw and adhere to it. Now, however much you change the image, it will all knit together harmoniously. For example, I was just thinking that you can't just make marks. You can't look at a reference and think, oh yeah, that's dark there, that's light there, that's that shape, I'll just reproduce that. That's not how it works. Having said that, I can just see a change of plane there. That seems to go again, and then it dips back around there. I rather like that, so I'll just mark where that is. I mean, for instance, you could look at this rock. I know that angle is faced that way, that way. The shadow underneath says that that is jutting out. So that's one face that way on, that face is that way on. The top is receiving more light. It all makes sense. It has to make sense. You can't just make marks and expect it to look right. The people looking at your drawing have to be able to read what you intended, right? So if it looks right to you, then it should send the same message to everybody else. So why not try this yourself, using the link to the reference material and guideline drawings? Think about what you're about to draw. Imagine how it feels to touch beneath your fingers and then draw. Draw it your way. And of course, we can help you and critique it at any stage in our support forum, if you join the DrawWithMike community. And you'll have a wealth of knowledge available to you in all the videos, from the beginner's basic series to the creative intermediate level and beyond. Of course, you could just faithfully copy what I'm doing, but that's not going to teach you anything about the mental processes involved in drawing. Copying involves zero understanding, but drawing is essentially built around understanding. You are, as I said, not just copying what you see. You're explaining to me what you see and understand. And it's your understanding that generates and builds your feelings into the drawing. But if you just copy the values and shapes, or copy mine, while that's an excellent way to learn the various techniques, it can cause you to believe you're actually quite good at this drawing thing. Well, your drawings are looking more and more like the references. But here's the kicker. You haven't been learning to draw. You've been learning to copy. And it's not often until you try to draw your first original drawing that you discover you don't know how to judge the various values, or even where to start. Although you think you have the knowledge to translate what you see in a reference into your own original artwork, you don't, because that's already been done for you. But don't despair. Don't think maybe I simply can't draw. Because all that copying has had one major benefit. It's taught you how to use your pencils, the effect of different pressures, which grade or mix of grades is good for this or that value, and so on. You've been able to concentrate on how without having to worry about why. But now it's time to move on, or to alter the way you've been thinking about drawing. Begin to tell us, your audience, what you feel about your subject. Don't be reluctant to make changes to your references, perhaps to omit or add elements to better tell your story. Because ultimately, that's what the art of drawing is, telling your story in images rather than words. That's done, I think. To me, it says rock. Hard, uneven, natural, weathered, open to the elements, and stones nestled perfectly and skillfully together into a stable structure. Well, that's my story. The links are below. Now let's see and enjoy yours.